Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called An Eye for Justice. When Janet Christensen met Raven Abaroa in 1988, the two were instantly taken with each other. Janet was one of 10 children in a Mormon family and was attending Southern Virginia University in Buena Vista, Virginia. She was the school's star midfielder on the NCAA Division III women's soccer team. Raven played on the men's soccer team, and the two quickly bonded over their Mormon faith and their love of their favorite sport. After 2 years of dating, Janet and Raven decided to marry, and in August of 2000, said their vows at the Mormon Temple in Washington, D.C. Soon after the wedding, the couple took positions with a sporting goods company in Durham, North Carolina, where they made a new home. Marriage can be difficult for any couple, and the Abaroas were no exception. Marital problems plagued them for a while, but by 2004, the two seemed to have worked out their problems, and on October 17th, they welcomed their son, Caden. On the afternoon of April 26, 2005, Janet picked Caden up from daycare and then met Raven to have her car dropped off for repairs. That evening, they met with a church member in their home, and later that night, Janet was in bed watching television while Raven left at about 8:30 p.m. to play soccer in a game in nearby Morrisville with some of his friends. When he returned home at about 11 p.m. that night, he found everything just as he left it until he entered the upstairs bedroom. There, he found Janet, covered in blood and unresponsive. The police were called, and when officers arrived, they saw the disturbing scene in the bedroom, but also found some blood on a wall near a side door to the home. Janet was in a kneeling position on the bedroom floor, covered in blood. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Thankfully, Caden was still asleep in another room and unharmed. An autopsy would show that Janet had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and had one defensive wound to her finger on her right hand. Sadly, they also found that Janet had been in the early stages of pregnancy. When officers questioned Raven, his alibi with his friends checked out. The blood he had on his shirt, he said, happened when he found Janet and hugged her to try to get a response from her. He claimed to know of no one who would want to harm his wife and said that they had a good marriage. Investigators could find no signs of a break-in, but Raven claimed that one of their laptops was missing. He also said that a collection of knives he kept had been taken too. For the next 24 hours, investigators questioned neighbors, but found very little and continued collecting evidence from the home. Outside of the laptop and missing block of knives from the kitchen, also missing were a checkbook, loan papers, and a cell phone. The family's Dodge Durango was searched. There, investigators found a knife with a pawn shop ticket. They also took swabs from different places in the home and from the clothes Raven had been wearing that night. When family members were questioned about the couple, they revealed a much different marriage for investigators than Raven had claimed. Janet's sister Sonia claimed that the marital problems they had suffered at the start of their marriage were much worse than reported. She said that in 2004, Raven had told Janet that he wanted to end the marriage and that he had cheated on her with multiple partners. Before any solid decision could be made, Janet found out she was pregnant with Caden. To everyone, this seemed to give them the push they needed, and the marriage improved. After Caden's birth, Raven swore that he would never cheat on Janet again and vowed to make their marriage work. Unfortunately, their already shaky relationship took another blow when Raven was fired from the sporting goods store that they both worked at. Just 2 months after Caden's birth, he was charged with 5 counts of embezzlement. Embarrassed, Janet quit her job there as well. Raven would plead guilty to the charges and was given 2 years supervised probation. Police records and the couple's financial documents confirmed everything. Their landlord even stated that he offered them 2 months of free rent to help them get back on their feet. Investigators also found that before her death, Raven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Janet and a $1 million policy on himself. Even though they were unable to pay rent, Raven made sure that those premiums were always paid on time. Despite mounting suspicions, there was no clear evidence to make an arrest, and the case began to run out of leads. When Raven asked the court to move his probation to Salt Lake City, Utah, there were no objections. While living there, in December of 2007, he met another single parent at Caden's daycare. Vanessa Pond began dating Raven, and soon they were living together. On Mother's Day in 2008, they got engaged. The day after her wedding shower was the first time Raven was abusive to Vanessa, something that would continue throughout their marriage. When their engagement was announced in the newspaper, Vanessa received a call that she never expected to receive. Janet's sisters had learned that Raven was marrying again, and they felt the need to try to warn the woman of his past and her potential danger. Their family had always felt Raven was to blame for Janet's murder. Raven had never talked about Janet to Vanessa, and she had been content to trust his silence. What Janet's sisters told her left her in disbelief. In an attempt to hopefully prove them wrong, Vanessa did her own online research, but became even more suspicious of Raven with what she found. One day, she decided to confront him. He told her he was framed, and the police in Durham were horrible. He would never say outright that he didn't commit the murder, but would answer questions about it by saying things like, "I loved her." Amidst all the fears and doubts, that summer, Raven and Vanessa married in her parents' backyard. The first night of their honeymoon would confirm some of those fears. After becoming drunk, Raven started to rant about how mad he was after Janet died. When he was finished, he laid down beside her and said, "I promise I'll never hurt you." At the end of 4 months, Vanessa no longer felt safe, and she left him. Their marriage was annulled in 2009. Raven moved to Montpelier, Idaho, and Vanessa remained in Utah. That was when Vanessa began to express the same fears Janet's family shared, and she started to speak out in the media against her ex-husband. During this time, Durham police assigned their 5th lead detective to Janet's now cold case, a man named Detective Charles Soule. As he dug through the file, he saw that in Raven's initial statements to police, he made several contradictions, and in Soule's conversations with him, those contradictions would continue. Quote, "The lights were on, the lights were off. The child was crying, child was not. You don't get those things wrong if you're telling the truth." When he dug even further, he found more evidence against Raven. The night of the murder, he had stated that a laptop had been stolen from his house and he had no way to retrieve the contents of the hard drive. But when Soule questioned one of Raven's ex-sister-in-laws, she said that after her sister's death, she had found disks in his belongings that contained the contents of that computer. When Vanessa had been doing her research, she had found a video online of Raven opening a buck knife in front of Janet and commenting on how much he liked to collect knives. It disturbed her enough that she asked him about it while they were married. He claimed to have never had a knife collection, nor did he have any interest in them. Soule checked CCTV footage from a convenience store Raven had visited the night of Janet's murder. In it, he was not wearing the same shirt that he supposedly wore home from the soccer game. Soule also struggled with the story about Raven finding Janet. Raven claimed to have hugged her, but there didn't seem to be enough blood on his shirt to account for contact like that. With no signs of a break-in and little signs of a struggle, it looked like she knew her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. However, it was something in the crime scene photos that proved to be the biggest break in the case. In one photo, on a counter, Soule could see that Janet's contact lens case was resting with the top off. He knew from interviews that Janet always took her contacts out before she laid down in bed to watch TV at night. Upon further review of the evidence, he found that her contacts were never recovered. Guessing that Raven had killed her before he left the house and before she was in bed, his next step was to have Janet's body exhumed. On February 1st, 2010, Raven was arrested in Idaho and charged with first-degree murder. In July, Janet was exhumed, and when forensic scientists examined her eyes, they found pieces of the missing contact lenses, showing Janet did not get ready for bed before Raven left for the soccer game, as previously thought. It was a miracle the lenses were there at all, since usually funeral homes will remove contact lenses when a body is prepared for burial and discard them. In 2013, Dr. Charles Zwerling, an ophthalmologist, received an evidence package from investigators. In it were the remaining slivers of contact lenses. When he cleaned the fragments with sterile water, they swelled from the water and resumed their convex shape. On one of the slivers, he could see the numbers 1, 2, 3, which proved to come from AccuView contact lenses, the same type Janet wore. Unfortunately, he was told that they needed proof the lenses dehydrated after burial and then rehydrated just as his sample had. Using a proposal from a forensic archaeologist, he recreated burying pig's eyes with contact lenses for varying lengths of time in boxes in the ground. They were then dug up and tested to see if they would rehydrate, and that's precisely what they did. At Raven's trial in 2013, his defense argued that the circumstantial evidence presented was not enough to convict Raven. They also argued that police had ignored other pieces of evidence that could potentially prove their client's innocence. The prosecution argued that Raven was controlling and abusive. His second wife, Vanessa, testified against him and spoke of the times he had abused her. Quote, "When he sees weakness, he just comes at you harder and harder. He told me how much he hated me and how much it didn't matter if I died." After 5 weeks, the jury had listened to more than 80 witnesses and looked at more than 500 pieces of evidence, but the prosecution still had no witnesses to the murder, no murder weapon, and no blood in the family car that would show Raven left after he killed Janet. The jury would end up deadlocked, with only one juror member sticking with a not guilty. A new trial was scheduled. Before his second trial could begin in March of 2014, Raven Abaroa turned in an Alford plea for voluntary manslaughter. In it, he didn't admit to any guilt, but admitted that there was evidence that could convict him. He was sentenced to 8 to 10 years in jail and was given credit for the 4 he had served in jail while awaiting trial. He would not be prosecuted in any way for the murder of his unborn child, as North Carolina was one of only 8 states at that time that didn't support charges of that nature. Raven Abaroa didn't testify at his trial, but he did speak at his sentencing in 2014. He stated that he didn't believe he had received a fair trial and didn't believe he ever would. Quote, "I don't think it's worth risking the possibility of spending the rest of my life in prison for something I didn't do. I take this plea to ensure that doesn't happen, and that's the only reason. I didn't kill my wife." After serving his sentence in 2017 at the age of 39, Raven was released from prison. In 2019, Mark Christensen, Janet's brother, told reporters, "Raven says he still loves Janet. I don't believe that. You don't cheat on someone you love. You don't ruin someone's life that you love. Looking back, I wonder if he ever did really love her, or if it was just him trying to win her over to manipulate her. The world should remember Janet as an amazing person, somebody who was kind, someone who was loving, someone who would just show you how to be a better person." Case cracked. I would like to thank ABC News, WRAL.com, The Herald Sun, Web Sleuths, The Guardian, and of course, Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case. And here she is now to discuss it with us. Wow, Christy. I don't know what it is, but these past few weeks, you've been giving us some cases where I'm wondering, like, is this a solid conviction or not? We'll get to that. But of course, one of the immediate things I'm very concerned about is what happens to Caden through all of this.
I know. That really bothered me too.
Yeah.
After his father's arrest, Caden's custody was given to Raven's mother, Karen, and the stepfather, Jim Bolton. Reports seem to indicate that Caden, who was 16 this year in 2021, is now presumably living with his father in Utah.
Okay. So family members there to kind of pick it up and care for him. You also wonder about, like, is there visitation that's happening with Janet's family as well? That's always such a sticky point in cases like this. So
definitely.
I hope they've been able to work out something like that, because it hurts the child to not have access to all their family member.
It does. And he's at an age he needs to know his whole family.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now, we noted in the story that North Carolina was one of 8 states at the time that didn't allow for a murder charge on an unborn child, but it seems like that would change. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about this. In 2007, many families, including Janet's, held vigils to raise calls for a North Carolina fetal homicide law in those cases. If a woman is murdered or assaulted and loses her baby, the death is considered a homicide and the perpetrator is charged with murder. Now, in 2011, North Carolina finally adopted HB 215, a fetal homicide law. It includes murder, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, assault inflicting serious bodily injury, and assault of an unborn child. Unborn child is defined as a member of the species Homo sapien at any stage of development. Okay. So if they're carried in the womb and they're developing, that's a baby.
Yeah. And I'm glad that they have some protections in place for that now. It's interesting to think about it with a story like this that was so close in terms of, where his court processes are happening. It's almost like they just missed the line in terms of getting an additional charge in there possibly.
And I see it happen a lot, unfortunately. You get a lot of women who are abused by their husband.
Yeah.
They'll be beaten, made to lose the baby, and nothing's done about that, and it should.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so talking about the big thing, the thing that it seems like broke this case is the contacts. So let's start with why didn't the funeral home remove them?
We're assuming it's because they're colored, or they're not colored, excuse me. When they're colored, they can see them in their eyes and they remove them when they prepare the body for burial.
Okay.
With hers being clear, they just didn't notice them.
They just didn't notice it, yeah. And they actually found them. Okay. And admittedly, it's an intriguing thing. It sounds like an episode of like Law and Order or something like, oh, it's the contact lenses. But in the real world, I always get the feeling like that's not quite solid enough. How did she do it 100% of the time where she would take them out before she would go to bed? I know people that have like, oh, I accidentally slept in my contacts, and they wake up the next morning, their eyes are all puffy and red.
I do it all the time.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where I'm kind of like, yes, it's nice to think in a perfect world of, oh, she always did that. But also it's 8:30 at night. She's watching TV in bed. And I don't know what type of vision she had, if it was, for correcting near vision or far vision. But isn't there some possible chance that she was wearing her contacts into bed and then maybe she was going to get up later and she knew she was going to get a glass of water and she was going to take them out then or something? It's one of those things where it doesn't seem as neat and tidy in terms of evidence for me.
And it didn't me either.
Yeah. Now, was there any other information that you bumped into? His defense was saying that there was things that the police were ignoring. Did you find anything that made it look like maybe this was possibly a wrongful conviction?
Well, I did. And this one has really played on my mind a little bit. ABC 11 says that the night of the murder, police found a bloody footprint and a bloody fingerprint that could not be connected to Abaroa. Detectives wondered whether there was a stranger in the house. Now, I don't know if they were so degraded or smudged they couldn't get information from them, but that seems like something important that needs to be tracked down.
Well, and how does that not bring in reasonable doubt? Like, this is one of those cases where I wish that there was some way for us to sit in the courtroom and go through everything that was presented. Obviously, that would be a serious, huge amount of time if you could even get access to all of those resources. But having just that mystery component, how did the defense not play that up and say, hey, look, we know investigators found this and that. Why are they not addressing these things? Instead, they're looking at a story about contact lenses. Like it seems like that would have been, I don't know, an easy way to kind of defend him. But thinking from his point of view, he's already sat in jail, for 4 years at this point.
Yeah.
Taking the offered plea and then saying, okay, that's only going to tack on 4 more. I've got this marathon halfway done right now if I take this. And I don't know that they would have let him know the sentencing. They probably gave him a range. They probably said, it's going to be between here and there.
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of really, really tough considerations on this. And it's another one of those case cracks that just leaves me a little uneasy. Like I wish it was more solid. I wish we had some kind of specific that would really help us push it across the line. But
Yeah, because the contacts, as interesting as they were and all of that testing, it's still not a foolproof way to prove that he committed this murder.
kind of that's what it seems like to me too. But this is what happens sometimes in court, right? I mean, these
Yeah.
very tough decisions that have to be made by juries. And obviously it was so tough, it was like 12 angry men. Like you had the whole jury pool going one direction. One guy held out, and that was enough to stop the first trial or to declare it a mistrial. One other lingering question I have. So we know that there is this insurance policy that's been kicked up. Apparently it had been kept current. So there's a payout that happens with that. I know sometimes if it's proven that there's a homicide or something, those payouts might not be paid. What happened to the insurance money for Janet?
That $500,000 eventually went to her mother.
Okay. Interesting. So they did pay it out, but they didn't pay it out to the person that was the primary beneficiary.
Right, because I'm sure it qualified for wrongful death and things like that, but not for him.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your work on this, Christy. We really appreciate you. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Sandy Reed, Melissa Heinbach, and Amanda Beard. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There, you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Stacy Rock recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Also, don't forget to subscribe below and hit that bell icon if you'd like to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new unsolved mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.